This is about beekeeping, one-on-one. I've got 3 more coming. If they straggle in, they can straggle in. If they don't, they don't. They miss out on all the good stuff. So I just, maybe a quick show of hands. How many of you here keep bees now? Anybody? Anybody used to keep bees? Okay. If you're a veteran beekeeper, what got you out of it?
I was a loser.
You were losing them?
Yeah, to the waxwing.
Okay, I'll talk to you a little about that.
Yeah.
You probably had another problem, actually. So
Oh, really?
Usually when you have issues like that, it's because something else is causing it.
It wasn't a real healthy hive.
Right, you probably had varroa mites or small hive beetle. I don't know how long ago we're talking.
Okay.
We'll talk about all that. But,
Okay.
I want to start about the first 15 or 20 minutes. I just want to kind of introduce you to the different parts of the hive. I want to put this together for you, kind of give you basically so we kind of know some of the jargon as far as what's what in a hive. So I've got a picture here. I do not have everything that's here because in beekeeping you have all these opinions about what you do and don't need. And some of this stuff I don't use, so if I don't use it, I didn't bring it. So if you'll notice on the bottom, the very, very bottom, that's a landing board. It has a very large, like an angle there. I don't use that, so I don't have one. The next piece up though is the base, and you have 2 options. If you're an old school beekeeper, this is what's called a solid base, just because it's solid. This is not as popular as it once was, so I don't use this, and I'll tell you why. It's because of the varroa mites. So what people are using today is a screen bottom board. Varroa mites tend to attach themselves. They're very, very small, and they suck on the bee. And over time, sometimes they'll fall off. And if they fall off and they have a screen, they'll fall right out, and that's good. They have terrible eyesight. They usually can't find their way back in. But if they have a solid bottom, they'll reattach to another bee. So this is it's for ventilation, but it's also it gets rid of varroa mites, which is a major problem in beekeeping today. So I'm going to use a screen bottom. The next piece is called the brood chamber. You'll notice I've got 2 boxes. They look similar, but one's taller than the other. There's a reason for that. So this is called a deep or a brood box or the base box. It's got several names. There's no glue, there's no nails. You just set it on here. Everything is modular like this. So this is a brood box. Now it's called the brood box because that's usually where they raise their offspring. And we'll get into how that looks like and everything. You're gonna have frames inside each one of these. And I'm just gonna let you pass it around. The frames are made for each box. So you will have, this one I've just put it in here, but you can tell these are different. So this is supposed to go in this other box, but I just put it in here because I wanted it easy transportation. Okay, so usually there's 10 frame and there's 8 frame boxes. I use 10 frames. You can use 8 frame. There's nothing wrong with using an 8 frame. I just prefer the 10. So typically, it's not in the picture here, but traditionally, I guess I should say, you'll have 2 of these boxes. They're both the broods or the deep boxes. And it's strictly for raising the babies, basically. All right, so if I was doing this in the real world, I'd have another box identical to this one. I would stack it on top. I didn't bring it today because I just didn't want to haul. I do put the box in the same thing. The next thing is a small screen here. I didn't bring it because I don't use it. It's called a queen extruder, or excluder, I should say. And it's just a plastic mesh. And it's small enough. It has holes in it that the worker bees can get through, but the queen can't. The queen's bigger than all the worker bees, and I've got some pictures of what they look like. She can't get above, and the reason for that is you don't want her laying eggs in the top part of what's called the super. This is where they put honey, basically. I don't use that. I don't use the excluder. Did you used to use it? I've had, and it's a debate. I mean, I'm doing this now, and they tend to put honey in the top. They're always going to store honey in the top, typically. I've had some beekeepers say it wears their wings out. This is strictly a choice that you got to make. If you go down, you can go down and buy a beginner kit from Atwood's, and it's going to have that plastic excluder in it. I just don't. I'm not saying you can't use it or it's bad to use. It's just I don't do it. So.
Do you get any mixed frames when you get honey in?
I haven't seen that yet, and that's what I'm saying. Typically, if you're managing this, I guess I don't want to say right because it's not to say that if you're using an excluder, you're doing it wrong. But you're going to build your brood here, and they're going to get kind of used to that area. And I've got some pictures that I've showed you, some real life where some bees have made homes inside of people's houses. You're going to see they tend to store the honey high in the home. So as you go up, they're going to gravitate toward the height. So if you do or do not use an excluder, it would go here. The next thing will be a super. All right, it's identical to this. It looks the same. I want to show you these. These are actual honeycomb that I had cut off. This is what they stored honey in. I cut the caps off, and so try not to smush down off. That's real live honeycomb there that I've used to pull honey out of last season.
Judge, what did you call that, super?
It's a super.
And so.
It's like for super. It's super
Oh,
seeds.
S-U-P-E-R.
Yeah, super like super duper. You again, all this stuff's available at AdWoods, and you can buy stuff all kinds of places. There's a company called Daydant that's been around forever. There's a lot of other companies that you can buy all this stuff. For most of just off the shelf stuff you're going to need to start, if this is something you want to do, is at AdWoods. And a lot of this stuff I've been buying is AdWoods. I mean, it's wood. Everything's pretty standard on size. Notice the color. Why do my bees like orange? You think, or why do you need orange? You know, what color were your hives back in the day?
Raw wood.
All just raw wood.
Oh, no, I painted them white.
Okay, why? Do you think the bees just like white, or?
No, I often wondered that. I'm sure I'm gonna get that.
It's for heat. It's for keep them cool. It's the same thing you see a beekeeper wear a white outfit. It has nothing to do with the bees. It's going to be cooler in the summer. You want to paint these a color of your choosing. Do not paint them a dark color because you will cook your bees if you paint them black. So I like the color orange is the reason I painted it. If you paint your boxes will probably last you 10 years probably if we have to replace. If you don't paint your boxes, you might be looking at 2 years maybe before the weather wears them out, and you're going to be replacing the boxes. So you can buy just the box. I mean, the frames will be fine,
Where?
but it's just a money thing. So I just pick a lighter color.
Well, you're probably gonna get to this, but while we're talking about that, is there a shade or a sun preference? Based
yes.
on the cooking and not
Typically-
cooking of your bees?
Yes.
Okay.
Typically, almost all beekeepers are going to face the opening of the hive to the east because of the sun, east or southeast.
Okay.
And it's because of the sunlight. The bees are they get going based on the sun. So when that sun comes in first thing in the morning, it says, wake up and let's get to work. You don't want a lazy bee. You point it to the west, they might not get up till noon, who knows? So when they see the sunlight, they get rolling.
Okay.
So also, the reason you want to face it that way, think of during the winter. Cold weather comes from the north and west typically. So if this is north and west, it's not going to blow in the opening. Now you do have a screen here, and that's something I want to show you. There's a way to block that. Most of these screen bottoms there's a groove cut in here on the bottom. This one does not have it. The solid ones don't have it because they don't need it because it's solid. But you have a piece of plastic that comes from the back, and you can slide it right in, maybe, and it will close off the weather. So if you want to block the wind when it's like really, really cold and windy, you can block the bottom off and protect your bees from the wind because that does provide a lot of ventilation. But during the winter, you want to kind of, again, I don't use this. Another reason for this, you'll notice it's crisscross. You can take, for like varroa, you're going to hear me talk about varroa mites a lot. You need to take a sample at some point. There's different ways to do it. A lot of people use powdered sugar, and you're going to sugar your bees. And again, this is not really this class, but you can use this to catch, it makes some of the mites fall off. And then there's a little mathematical formula. You wait like 10 minutes and you count how many mites you have and you multiply that times some number. That gives you an estimate of how many mites you have in your box. And if you reach a 2% threshold, that tells you you need to treat for that condition. If you don't reach that threshold, then you're probably okay, let the bees do their own thing. So this thing has a purpose other than just closing in the bottom for weather is what I'm saying. So, all right, so typically beekeepers have 3 supers. So, and then you don't put them on all at once. And the same thing here, when you start with your brood, you're gonna wait till there's 10 frames in it. You're gonna wait to see about 8 of those frames fill up. And when I mean fill up, they're gonna draw from that bare basic comb. They're gonna draw that honeycomb out. They're gonna put something in there. If it's brood, they'll put brood in it. They'll put pollen in it. They'll put honey in it. But you just want to be watching that. You can probably check your bees. Everybody's a different rule of thumb. Depends on the time of year. Every couple of weeks, once a month, something like that. Depends on what's going on. Once you've got 8 of these 10 frames full, add a box. Same thing. And then there's rules on that. When you add an empty brood box, there's some people who swear by the checkerboard pattern, to where you pull out every other frame there and you put every other frame in here, and it forces the queen and everyone to go back and forth so they don't ignore them, because they're going to have brood up here and they're going to want to take care of them. They got to keep them kind of warm. It makes them circulate. You're forcing them to go up and down, and they'll fill in all those frames. Usually they fill in from the center out, so the frames are gonna be empty, are gonna be on the outside typically, unless you're mixing stuff up or something. So you're gonna throw your super on. You don't throw all three supers on at once. There's a reason for that, there's a term for that. I'm not gonna remember it right now, but it's basically like, you know, if, for those of you that are working, if your boss said, hey, here's what you're doing for the next 6 months, it's kind of overwhelming. So it just, hey, just tell me what I'm doing for today. So this is today's job. So you just want to let them fill this up. They won't fill this up in a day. It encourages them to work more if you give them just enough to fill up. So when this thing is full, you throw your second super on. When that one's 80% full, you throw your third one on. At the end of the year, you're going to pull all the supers off. And I'm kind of jumping through some of how you're going to do that. But you're going to pull those supers off, and then all that is your honey, basically. And the two broods are going to stay, the two bottom boxes are going to stay all winter typically. Or maybe you could go back to one, just totally depends on what's going on in your hive. So on the top, let me just finish how this goes. There's what they call this the inner cover. And I've seen these made a couple different ways. They've always got this hole here. This is just ventilation. And usually one side is deeper than the other. And some people say that the deep side goes to the top. I like putting the deep side to the bottom because sometimes I'll put supplements in up here. There's different things called like a protein patty. And you take it and you can kind of, it's almost like gum. But you can actually eat it. It tastes like a little spearmint. And you put it on the top of the frame, it's like a food for the winter. It replaces their pollen. So if you have a groove here, it just sets in there way easier. Whereas if it's not, then you end up, this won't set on there. There's an outer cover as well. They call this the telescoping cover. Because like a telescope, it goes, it's kind of weird. They call it telescope because it kind of goes in and out, I guess, like an expanding telescope. The reason there are two covers is the inner cover will probably be glued down. When you come out to your bees to work your bees, this thing will almost always be glued down. So you're going to have what's called a hive tool. And you'll have to get in here and you'll end up having to pry this up. They use it's called propolis. It's from the trees, basically it's like a sap. And they glue everything together. So, and then the outer cover, so if there's an inner cover, they typically do not go above the inner cover. There's a hole here, you open this up, you might see a few bees here, but you're not gonna see a ton. When you open this up, then you'll see everybody. So typically, if they're below there, you're not gonna glue the top on. Once your top is on, I typically set this on a cinder block, and I take a strap, just like you get a strap at like Home Depot has some hooks. And I'm gonna go through the cinder block because I want some weight if there's any wind. It doesn't have to be a cinder block, but just something that's got some metal to it, weight to it. Take that strap over the top and I tie it and you ratchet it down to keep this on so that cows or if you have any, I put these out in cow fields or whatever, cows like to rub on them and knock them over. So you might want to curtain that off. Something else you asked about placement. I try to put these as close to water, a source of water. It could be a stream, it could be a swimming pool. Really, that's not probably the best source, but
Mine is.
yeah, I don't know if anybody's interested in doing this. You know, some people are doing this in their backyard. If your neighbor has a swimming pool, your bees are going to be in that swimming pool drinking the neighbor's water, which is, it's not that the water is an issue, it's the, hey, why are all your bees over here? You know, you might have some angry neighbors. Different cities have different laws on this. I know Denton is very bee friendly right now. They're doing a big deal. You can have up to 4 of these in your backyard, I believe, is what the rule is. Some cities like Frisco call this a nuisance, and it's actually, there's a legal term for it where you are keeping your neighbors from the lawful use of their property, is what they say, because they can't enjoy their backyard and their plants, because your bees are over there harassing them.
Yeah,
So
but
you-
they also say you can't put a pickup truck in the driveway.
Well, that might be true. So what I'm telling you is you need to check your local ordinances. I don't know where everybody lives, but here in Gainesville, I don't know what it is in Gainesville. I'm out in the county, out in the country. So if you're looking to be a backyard beekeeper, you might want to check to make sure this is not considered a nuisance type of a deal.
Did you put that metal cap on there?
Huh?
Did you put that metal cap?
They come this way. This is called a weather cover. If you buy these at Date Ant, which that's the big company, they've got a place over in Paris, but if you can drive to Paris and get all this stuff, but if you order it online, it comes from Illinois. I don't know how that works, but that's how they do it. You can get these, at A-Woods, this is about $105. $105 gets you the base, the brood box, the inner and the outer cover. It also buys you I'm gonna talk about this in a minute. This is a feeder. Some people say you should never use this, but I'm just gonna, I think this, pretty sure this comes with it. And you get this little fancy restrictor. Now the restrictor, this is something I use on occasion. I try to use it, you know, during the middle of the summer, or when the bees are busy, I just leave it wide open. During the winter, you want to restrict this. You have different notches. You have a notch here. If you turn it again, you have just a one notch here. This should fit right in here. And this one's not going to fit very well. There it goes. You have to kind of wedge it in. So the bees can only get here. Now it helps with the bees keep predators out because they have a less of an area they have to guard. As it cools down, their population shrinks. Also, it keeps predators, mice will try to get in here during the winter. It's not going to keep the other insects out, but mice will try to get in here for the warmth. And if it's really bad weather, or maybe you have a really weak hive, then you might just go to this, to where you have just a single notch, and you're thinking, man, that's just not good, but they'll be fine with it. And just put that in there. And usually this is a winter-only thing. During the summer, from about March until September, I don't use any of that. I honestly don't put this in all my hives now. Some of it's because I'm lazy or I'm busy. I'm busy, that's what it is. I'm busy, not lazy. But I don't know, I just don't use it a lot. On this deal here, it's called a Boardman feeder. What they don't say is you get a mason jar, you can buy the jar, it's just a cap, and the cap has all these little holes in it. And a lot of people like to feed their bees, especially when you establish a new colony, you're gonna wanna feed them. And you're gonna wanna feed them sugar water. And I prefer the 1-to-1 during the spring and summer. You're gonna have 1 part sugar, 1 part water. And that's just measured by cut. Just put a cup of sugar, a cup of water in a mason jar, that the lid fits this. Those jars will have holes. You shake that up really good to where it's completely dissolved. You turn it over, you put it in here, and then this fits in real nicely, like that. It wedges in. And so the bees on the inside can access this. They'll go in here, and they'll go up and actually they'll remove the sugar water from here, and they go and they feed everybody. The problem with this is a lot of people say this encourages robbing. You have robber bees. And what that means is, if you have, let's say you have 2 hives, and I reckon if you're gonna do this, I wouldn't do just 1, I'd do at least 2. And there's reasons for that, and I'll talk about that later. But let's say this hive is very productive, and they go out, man, they're collecting nectar and pollen, they're doing great. This hive over here has realized, hey man, you know, they've got a feeder over here. If we just fly over here and go in here, and we can take their stuff, and then we'll just take it back to our place. Well, that encourages them to, even when this runs out, they'll start stealing other stuff from over there. So really, you only have 1 hive that's working, and the other hive is robbing. So you don't want that. So a lot of people do what they call in-house feeder, or it's a different kind of feeder. It could be like this, but what you do there is you would get another super here, just like this. And you put it up, you take all the frames out. You put this on the inside, and you got a box here. So it's encapsulated. So only the bees that are way up in the house can get into this. And then you cap it off. And so the bees on the outside world don't really know what's even there. It's an in-brood feeder. This is another one of those start an argument with a beekeeper. If you ask 10 beekeepers how to do something, you'll get 10 different answers, okay? So I'm just telling you that up front. There's a lot of personal stuff that you want to make it. There'll probably be somebody telling I'm killing bees because it's orange. And they just tell you, they say if you did this, it's the greatest thing or it's the worst thing. So you're going to hear lots of opinions. But I think that's fun, though. You can make it your own deal. Okay, so I just want to go real quick, not real quick, but we'll close this up. I want to kind of simulate you inspecting a beehive out in your field, wherever you're at. So I'm going to come up to my bees, and I want to check them out, okay? So what do you think this thing is? It's a smoker. What do I put in here to burn? There's some special bee burning stuff that you use. Huh? Leaves, pretty much anything that'll burn. I can sell you, I can go out and pick up grass in my front yard and put it in a bag, and I'll sell it to you for $5 a bag. Or a lot of people like to use pine needles. It's down like Austin area. You go down there, it's just pine needles everywhere. I can get pine needles here, I know some people, but pine needles are good.
Spanish moss is what.
Moss, I know a guy that's big into woodworking, and he has all these really fine, I'm not talking sawdust, but like these big chips. And he'll put that in there. I use hay a lot. Hay is not the best, but it'll work. If you can get it's keeping it going, it kind of goes out. Anyway, you're going to start the fire in the bottom of this thing. What you don't do is you don't cram it full and you light it on top. You don't do that. Because what happens there is, you squeeze this and the fire's on top, you're gonna blow flames out here. When you do this, you're gonna cook your bees. So you want your flame, you want the hot part in the bottom. So you put just a little bit of whatever you're burning in the bottom. You light it in here, you get it going good. Then you take some more of your fuel and you jam it in there and you close it. So you basically put the fire out. And then it'll smoke, and that way it filters that flame and heat through all that other fuel that's in there. And you want to kind of check it. If it's too hot to touch your hand, it should be almost room temperature. Or it shouldn't be warm anyway. I'm not saying I haven't been guilty of lighting it on top every now and then. Again, you just have to be aware that you don't want to do this and a blue flame comes out here. That's not going to work. So, all right, so I come up for my bees, I undo my top, I come up to the front. I don't stand in front of this. You don't want to stand in the front. They're going to smoke along the front here. You'll hear them. You'll wake them up. If they're, I've come up to hives before, and you're like, man, I don't see anybody. I don't see them. You do this, you're going to know. They'll start buzzing. You're going to crack the top. You're going to, again, fan them. You're going to, you can put this on the ground. This is not a big deal. You just want to make sure there shouldn't be any bees in here, really. Something you do want to do is when you look in here, if you do have small hive beetles, they tend to gravitate towards the top. They'll also gravitate toward the bottom. They want to be where it's dark. So you just want to take it, and once you open it, they're going to run for cover. So you just want to squish as many as you can. You just want to take a kind of an inventory of what's going on, okay? So the next thing,
What did you say they were?
small hive beetles, and we'll talk
Oh,
more about
okay.
that. There's ways to get rid of them. But usually, I tend to see them in the top a lot. They're probably everywhere. And if you're doing do bees, you're going to have them. It's just the threshold is about 200. Now, who's going to sit there and 5, 7? Would you guys stop running around 8, 9, 10? You're just going to, it's an experience thing. You're going to say, man, that's more than I've ever seen before. I need to do something about that. This is probably going to be glued down. You're going to put this in here. You're going to pry it. This, there's probably some bees here. So you might want to set this with the bees on the outside, kind of like that on the ground. The way you use this tool, a lot of people take this, all this stuff's going to be, I'm going to pull this down a little bit so you can see it. You don't do this in real life, I'm just showing it at an angle here so you can see what's going on. These are all going to be glued together, and they're going to be glued to this, typically, and I'm missing a frame, there should be 10 in here. What you don't do is you don't do this, that don't work very good. You don't want to pry up like this. What you're going to do is you're going to take this in, you're going to take it in like that, you're going to crack it like that. You're just going to use that lever. I'm going to crack one side loose. I'll put it back up here because I'm going to show you something. And you want to systematically go from one side to the other if you're doing a full inspection. This does not come with the Atwood's starter kit. You can just hang this on the outside. You hang your boards here.
Oh, wow, that was.
And you want to hang them in an order. Well, and usually the ones on the outside aren't going to have many bees on them.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is when you pull this out, let's just say this is a brood frame. I'm looking for the queen, and again, you're not gonna. I'll show you what she looks like. I really don't want to see her. If I do see her, I don't want to hang her on the outside here because you might brush up against it. You lose your queen, and you're out of the bee business. Okay. So assuming I don't see her, and you're probably not going to see her at the top, then I put her out. I put it on the outside. I might even do 2 of them like that, and I want to just kind of whatever I'm looking for. So I'll hang maybe 2 on the outside. Again, I'm not standing in the front, and that gives me room. Now I've got room to go and look and say, all right, yeah. And you just take them and you slide them over. And you take and you look and you slide them over. You go one side or the other. Once I'm all done, I push them all back to the other way. I put these back in. I want to put everything back in the same order. And the reason I do that is because sometimes the comb is made kind of irregular and it'll fit back together if you put it back together in the right order. So try not to flip it over. Whatever you do, just put it back in the way you found it. Take this off. Put everything back on. And a lot of people always worry about killing bees. You're going to kill bees doing this. Just don't slam it down. So you might want to, because the bees are going to be all on this edge. So you want to kind of take it and maybe just kind of slide it. And so then come, all right, girls, let's go. Or whatever you do. Just don't crush them. Look for the queen. Don't crush it. Kill your queen. Put your top back on, your outer top, strap it all back together.
How often do you inspect it?
It just totally depends on how busy I am or lazy.
Oh.
Just depending on what's going on. Now, if I was a professional, commercial, this is my livelihood, I'd probably be out there every other week. I'd probably look at every hive at least every month, minimum. If it's a hobby. The thing about bees, they've been around for a gajillion years. They can live without mankind's intervention. So it's kind of a stress reliever. Some of this is kind of just cool, to watch what they do. And I've got, again, I have videos, we'll see more. It's kind of up to you. I would say at least once a month. During the spring, I want to see what's going on a little, because if you've got a nectar flow going, they can fill up a hive of super in a week if everything's prime time, rolling good. If they get too full, if they get crowded, they'll swarm on you, which means half of them are gonna leave. I don't want that to happen. You can manage that by giving them room. The only reason they swarm is because you run them out of room. And you'll know that when you go in, and again, I'll keep referencing, I got more pictures. You'll see certain indications that'll tell you, oh no, I've had a swarm. And you'll be, by looking at what's going on in the frame, by doing your inspection, you'll know half of my bees left. So if I have half as many bees, that means I don't have as much honey. What do you got?
Silly question. So is the harvest, is there one main harvest or is there multiple?
That depends on who you are. Typically, most beekeepers are doing this July to September-ish.
Okay.
Some people are of the opinion that you leave all the honey on there. If you take too much in July, you run the risk of starving them to death.
Oh, okay.
So what you want to do, depending on what your needs are, what your plan is, you could just leave everything in place until about April. To when, like, who knows with the weather, you gotta watch the weather. So, and then what you would do is, once you know that, hey, spring is coming, they've got all they need, then you just take everything off and you harvest it.
Harvest.
So that way you're not having to, if you leave 3 supers of honey, you're not gonna have to feed anybody, that's just a given.
Okay.
So, also, you said this is a certain style of bee hive. This is called a Langstroth. There are other styles. The popular one right now is called a flow hive. which
Yeah,
the-
how does that one?
The more I learn about that, the less I like it. It's
It
made out of
seems
plastic.
weird.
It seems easy. It's good for lazy people, maybe. Maybe I should test it. It's expensive.
Yeah.
This is about $100. That one's about 500 to 800 probably. And that's just for the top part, and it's plastic.
The thing is, you don't have to harvest, right? I mean,
Well, it's
you
got these screws on the back, and what you do is you turn them, and it splits the plastic honeycomb in half, and it breaks the seal, allows the honey to run out these tubes that they've incorporated. So you just put a jar in the back, and you crank this thing, you walk off and go drink whatever you need to drink, you come back and just full of honey. Makes it too easy.
Okay.
They're made in Australia.
There's a guy that does it in Australia. The thing I don't like about it is, this is real wax. Wax is kind of like a filter. So if your bees are exposed to like pesticides and so forth, the wax is gonna catch some of that. If you're just running it through plastic, you're gonna catch that. It might, I'm afraid, I don't know. It's just not natural, in my opinion.
Well,
But, you know.
they said that about these hives too, when they went from the
That could be.
straw hive to this.
This has been going since like the
Yeah, but before that, they used the.
well, I can show you that. Well, they had to kill the bees usually to get
Yeah.
that, so that wasn't good. That
But
wasn't sustainable.
I have a question. I wanna put hives out in Marysville on our ranch.
Bees aren't allowed in Marysville, that's just not possible. No, go ahead.
But my husband keeps saying, because he hauls honeybees for a living,
Mhm.
and so he's used to looking at like almond orchards and canola fields and that kind of stuff, so he thinks there's not enough.
You can't, but are you worried about there being too many bees out there?
No, he's worried about them starving.
Well, if there's something, you need to feed them if you're worried. You have to look at what's going on here to know if they're starving. So
Yeah,
if
but
there's
I
no
was
honey in
thinking
here, they're
there's gotta
starving.
be pollen, there's gotta be stuff,
It depends on the time of year.
yeah.
So during the spring, summer, early fall, I'm not too worried about them starving.
Okay.
I'm worried about them starving from about now, about January, February, on to April, May.
Yeah, but if you just left the honey in until spring.
If you leave all this honey, then you're probably fine.
Okay.
There's a lot of variables. Maybe the hive's not very strong and they don't have much stores. If they don't have stores, meaning honey and pollen, then you're gonna be using this a lot.
But there should be with,
If everything is run like it's supposed to,
yeah.
it should be. The roads should be nice around here too, but
Well, I mean,
they're not.
that's a good question, because when I live out by Mountain Springs, I have the last couple of years noticed, in anticipation of maybe having some hives, what's blooming
Yeah.
in the spring, I just don't see a lot.
Well, you don't have to, unless, you gotta remember, bees will harvest out about 3 miles, which is like, I think it's like 18,000 acres. So, I mean, the closer they are to a good source,
That's a pretty good
that's
thing.
better. But just think of, this is the center of the world, and you go 3 miles that way and all the way around, and that's what they're harvesting. So the closer they can be to a really good source of something, but if you're talking like you're in a coastal Bermuda field, They don't bloom there typically. So maybe you wanna put these like on a fence line close to a neighbor that you know has sunflower or mesquite trees are good for honey. So
Mesquite trees are good for honey.
Yeah.
they're really good. The only problem with mesquite honey is it crystallizes a lot, but it tastes, I had a guy tell me it was the gold standard of honey in Texas. Without a mesquite tree, we wouldn't have much honey on the southwest, because they do have a bloom apparently. I know mesquite's only good for barbecue and honey apparently. That's about it. So,
I got
Okay.
it.
No,
It
it's
does.
pretty, makes pretty good.
well, I just don't want to touch it. We
How
got
about,
any questions
how about
about
top
this?
bar?
A top bar is a different style. Top bar kind of looks like a triangle, and it's a long deal like this. There's no foundation like that. There's no plastic. There's literally just that top bar piece of wood that sits in there, and they build their comb on that. It's more of an organic way. The downfall of that, or I don't want to say downfall, it's more work when it comes time to harvesting honey. You can cut the caps off that, you put it in a machine, and you spin it. In a top bar, you're not going to be able to do that because there's no frame. Now, if you're into chunk honey, which is where you just take the honey, you cut it into squares, and it's capped, then top bar's the way to go because there's no plastic foundation to worry about. So it depends on what your goals are.
Is that how it used to be when you would buy honey and it had all the?
Had
in
a
it?
big chunk in it.
Yeah.
You can still get, and you can set this style up too, but you don't, that's plastic. But you can make a wax foundation that'll go in there if you change the style. That's called a grooved. It's got a groove in there. You can pop that plastic piece out, and you can actually put a wax foundation in with some wire to support it. And then when it comes time to cut it, you're cutting through wax. It's all natural. You wouldn't do chunk honey with this style
Right.
of frame. Top bar you would. Top bar would be great for that. But if you're doing top bar, you probably don't want to use a centrifuge spinner because they're just going to tear everything up. So you have to kind of decide what your goals are.
The only knock I've ever read against top bars is that your bees spend a whole lot of time,
They're building wax.
building
It
wax.
takes 8 pounds of honey to produce 1 pound of wax. So where with this system, they've already got something to build on, and every year that you can build that, they spend more time collecting honey and less time building wax. So if I'm trying to be a honey producer, that's probably more efficient. If I'm trying to be a chunk honey producer, probably top bar is the way to go. So you have to decide what are your goals, what you want to get out of this. So what else on the? I got lots more stuff here, but what else we have on just the setup here? We can come back to some of this later, but.
If you had grandchildren, how far from the house should it be?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I'd say a couple 100 feet, at least 100 feet. I mean, it's not like the bees are going to come right up and attack them. Say, hey, those are grandkids, let's go get them. But if the kids come over and poke and prod and do things, then they might learn a lesson there. But
It'll only take one.
that's right. And I've got a stat on how many stings a person can take before they need to really worry about a problem. And it's a lot more than you'd think. Okay, I'm going to slide all this to the side. I think we're good on this.